There was a time when legends were untouchable, their names etched in the annals of Hollywood history. Imagine a once great icon who graced the silver screen, captivating millions with his performances, now reduced to a solitary figure in a remote haven, far from the bustling streets of Los Angeles. In a quiet desert town where the horizon meets rugged mountain silhouettes, he and his equally enigmatic partner chose a life away from the incessant glare of public attention. Their deliberate disappearance was more than an escape. It was a final act of defiance, a statement that even stars can be swallowed by obscurity if left alone. For years, he had been revered for roles that defined a generation, his name synonymous with grandeur and passion. Yet, behind the accolades and the bright lights, there lay a quiet, almost desperate need for solitude. Alongside him was a woman whose own star had once shone brightly on the concert stages and intimate theaters alike. Together, they retreated into the anonymity of a modest home in a town where the only sounds were the whisper of the wind across barren roads and the occasional distant hum of life. Their lives had once been filled with constant activity, press interviews, gala events, and red carpet appearances. But here, in their chosen isolation, they found the kind of peace that only the forgotten can know. It was on one seemingly ordinary morning that the delicate balance of their reclusive life began to unravel. The day dawned with a familiar routine, a modest breakfast by the window, quiet moments shared over simple words, and the habitual stirring of coffee that warmed the otherwise chilly air. Neighbors, accustomed to the unobtrusive existence of the reclusive pair, noted nothing unusual. In fact, for many, it was just another day in a town where everyone kept to themselves. Yet beneath the mundane surface, an insidious shift was taking place, one that would soon expose the deep fissures in a life built on silence. As the sun crept higher, shadows lengthened in the unkempt garden and inside the weathered walls of the home. A palpable sense of loss began to permeate every room. The woman, known for her gentle presence and artistic soul, had quietly slipped away from the world the previous day without so much as a whisper of farewell. There were no frantic phone calls or hurried news reports, only a subtle, almost imperceptible absence that would eventually cast a long shadow over everything that followed. In a life measured by quiet rituals and the slow passage of days, the loss was as devastating as it was unseen. For the next 7 days, the house became a stage for a tragedy that would chill even the most hardened hearts. Time itself seemed to stall. Every tick of the clock was swallowed by an overwhelming silence. The once celebrated actor wandered through his home with a vacant look, a mind clouded by the relentless progression of an illness that blurred the boundaries between memory and reality. His Alzheimer's had long been a silent specter in the background, a slow, inexorable force that eroded the clarity of his past and the promise of his future. Now it transformed his world into a series of indistinct images and half-remembered moments, leaving him adrift in a reality where the past mingled with the present in a haunting dance. Within those 7 long days, the house bore witness to a heartbreaking display of abandonment. The living room, once a space filled with laughter and light, grew increasingly forlorn. A half-finished cup of tea, now cold and untouched, sat on a table as if frozen in time. The books that once lined a shelf, filled with stories of adventure and love, gathered a thin film of dust, their pages no longer inviting exploration. Every room echoed with the absence of the vibrant energy that had once defined the couple's life together. Amid these silent days, 2 loyal dogs continued to roam the property. Their eyes, wide with a mix of confusion and sorrow, silently chronicled the slow disintegration of the life they once knew. They moved from room to room as if searching for traces of their mistress, a familiar hand to pet or a comforting voice that would call them by name. Yet in the eerie stillness of the house, their silent vigil was punctuated only by the occasional low whine, a mournful reminder of what had been lost. And then there was the mysterious fate of a 3rd dog, whose lifeless body was discovered. tucked away in a forgotten closet. How had it come to be isolated in such a manner? Was it an unintended casualty of the chaotic unraveling, or did it serve as an even darker symbol of a reality slipping through grasp? Slowly, the relentless march of time brought the inevitable collapse of the once proud actor. On an afternoon that began like any other, the rhythmic pulse of daily life was shattered by an unexpected knock at the door, a sound that reverberated through the silent corridors and disrupted the fragile equilibrium of isolation. When he mustered the strength to answer, he was met not with warmth or recognition, but with the stark, unyielding truth of his solitude. There on the doorstep, he found no friendly face, only the harsh reality that the world had moved on without him. As he stepped away from the door, the weight of the past 7 days finally overwhelmed him. In a final, heart-wrenching moment of clarity, the man who had once been the embodiment of Hollywood brilliance collapsed. His body, weakened by years of isolation and a relentless disease, could no longer hold the burden of unspoken grief and mounting despair. The familiar walking stick he had depended on for decades lay by his side, a silent witness to his final struggle. It was a poignant image, evoking the tragic irony of a man who had once captivated millions with his talent, now reduced to a solitary figure incapable of calling for help. In the days that followed, as the authorities and a few concerned locals pieced together the final chapter of this tragic story, a series of unsettling questions emerged. How had a man, whose life had once been celebrated on grand stages and immortalized in films, come to be abandoned by time and forgotten by the world? Why had no one noticed the subtle signs of his deteriorating condition until it was too late? And most haunting of all, what had transpired during those agonizing 7 days when he wandered the halls of a home that had become both his sanctuary and his prison? The investigation that ensued revealed a trail of poignant clues and small details that spoke volumes about a life steeped in isolation. In one room, a glass of water sat on a dusty nightstand, a simple object that had remained unchanged, a relic of normalcy amidst chaos. On a bedside table, a neatly folded blanket suggested that, even in his final hours, the man clung to the rituals of a shared life, perhaps hoping that his lost partner might return at any moment. Outside, the 2 remaining dogs continued their silent patrol, their watchful eyes filled with a sorrowful understanding that no words could convey. Every detail, every silent testament wove together a narrative of abandonment and grief that left more questions than answers. As news of the tragedy spread beyond the confines of the small town, it sent ripples through an industry that once adored him. Former colleagues, directors, and co-stars expressed their disbelief and sorrow, their voices tinged with regret for not having reached out sooner. The story of his final days served as a harsh reminder that even the brightest stars could be allowed to wither away in silence, their struggles hidden behind the glittering facade of past glory. The film industry, known for its relentless pursuit of the next big thing, was forced to confront the uncomfortable reality that the very people who had once enchanted audiences could be left to fade without a trace. Beyond the world of entertainment, the unfolding mystery also resonated on a deeply personal level. It stirred conversations about the importance of human connection, about the responsibility we all share in looking after one another, especially those who have given so much to our collective cultural memory. The stark loneliness of the reclusive icon prompted a broader reflection on the nature of fame and the inevitable cost of isolation. In a society that prizes the new and the exciting, the silent demise of a beloved figure underscored the tragic consequences of neglect, both personal and societal. In the wake of the investigation, the narrative of his final days began to crystallize into a cautionary tale. His life, once defined by dazzling success and the roar of adoration, had come to an end in a quiet, unremarkable room. There were no final interviews, no grand declarations, just the slow, silent passage of time marked by regret and sorrow. His collapse at the threshold of his own home became a powerful symbol of the danger inherent in unchecked isolation, a reminder that even legends are not immune to the ravages of loneliness. As the community struggled to come to terms with the loss, the questions that lingered grew ever more profound. Had he, in his final moments, realized the full extent of his isolation, or was his mind, clouded by both disease and despair, unable to grasp the magnitude of the tragedy unfolding around him? The image of his familiar walking stick lying helplessly beside him haunted those who witnessed the aftermath, symbolizing not just his physical frailty, but the emotional burden of a lifetime spent in solitude. The investigation also cast a new light on the subtle, everyday rituals that had once offered comfort and stability. The way a simple cup of tea, left to cool in a forgotten corner, could speak volumes about a life once filled with routine and shared moments. Every untouched object in that silent home became a relic, a quiet witness to a love that had withered away, and to the passage of time that had ultimately claimed him. Even the fate of the 3 dogs served as a powerful metaphor. While 2 persisted in a state of mournful alertness, the demise of the 3rd underscored the finality of a reality that could not be rewritten. In the reflective days that followed his passing, the story took on an almost mythic quality. Neighbors and acquaintances began to piece together fragments of memories. A conversation overheard at the local market, a glimpse of him on a quiet afternoon walk, that together painted a portrait of a man who had once been larger than life. His retreat from the world, his descent into solitude, and his final moments of painful clarity all coalesced into a narrative that was as tragic as it was enigmatic. By the time the authorities wrapped up their inquiry, one truth remained glaringly evident. The man who had once brought so much light to the screen had been left to confront the darkness alone. In the end, his final days were not defined by any dramatic confrontation or heroic last stand, but by the slow, inexorable passing of time in a house that had once been filled with laughter, now echoing only with silence. The haunting realization that even icons can be forgotten became a stark reminder for all who heard his story. In a final twist of bitter irony, the tale of his isolation began to spark a conversation far beyond the small town and the fading echoes of old Hollywood. It became a rallying cry to cherish every human connection, to reach out to those who might be slipping away unnoticed, and to remember that behind every storied face is a fragile heart yearning for understanding. His story, tragic as it was, served as a call to action, a plea that no one, no matter how famous or forgotten, should ever be allowed to vanish into silence without a chance for redemption. Thus, in the quiet aftermath of his life, his final chapter emerged not as a solitary ending, but as a powerful, resonant lesson. The silent corridors of his home, the abandoned cup of tea, the dusty remnants of a life once vibrant, all told the same story, that the cost of isolation is immeasurable. And while the lights of fame may dim with time, the need for connection, empathy, and care remains as urgent as ever. This narrative is more than just a recounting of one man's tragic end. It is an invitation to reflect on our collective responsibility to ensure that no one slips away unnoticed, no matter how luminous their past. It challenges us to ask ourselves whether we have truly embraced the full measure of our shared humanity, or whether we are content to let the ghosts of forgotten legends wander silently in the shadows. For in the end, the final silence of a once bright star is not merely the absence of sound. It is a profound, echoing void that calls on all of us to be better, to care more deeply, and to ensure that every life, no matter how extraordinary, is valued and remembered. In the story of this reclusive Hollywood icon, there lies a somber reminder. The brightest stars are not immune to the darkness of isolation, and even the most celebrated lives can end in quiet despair if we allow indifference to take hold. His legacy, now marked by silence and solitude, stands as both a tribute to a bygone era of cinematic brilliance and a warning against the perils of neglect in our modern world. May his final days, enveloped in a silence that was as haunting as it was inevitable, serve as a beacon for those who believe in the enduring power of human connection. And so, as the tale draws to a close, the lingering questions remain, a legacy of mystery, regret, and quiet sorrow. How many more lives, luminous yet fragile, are slipping away in a world too busy to notice? And what will be our answer when faced with the quiet, unspoken truth of a life lived in isolation? The echoes of his final chapter invite us to reflect, to reach out, and ultimately to ensure that the silence of indifference is never the last word.